It is said he was the only man whom Ivan the Terrible feared, an emaciated man who walked the snowy streets of Moscow in rags, if anything. Saint Basil the Blessed, full for Christ, is one of the most famous saints of Russia. Indeed, if you've ever seen a photograph of Moscow at all, you've most likely seen the cathedral which bears his name. That building with its tall, colorful domes is Saint Basil's Cathedral, not the presidential palace of the Kremlin, despite how Western media may use its likeness as such. Saint Basil himself is a type of saint known as a fool for Christ, a saint whose actions may seem contrary to the wisdom of the world, such as wearing little clothing in winter, or criticizing a czar known for his cruelty to his face. Saint Basil once upbraided Ivan in church during the Divine Liturgy, that he should pay attention instead of thinking about building a new palace. Now, if anyone is even slightly familiar at all with Orthodox Christianity, icons no doubt come to mind. Orthodox iconography is meant to be theology for the eyes, windows into heaven. Miracles, of course, are associated with icons, whether healings or icons from which myrrh streams forth. In fact, America is even home to one of these myrrh-streaming icons, the famous Hawaiian Ivory icon, which I've visited a few times myself. These miracles are God's grace flowing forth from physical material, just as St. Paul's handkerchiefs healed those who were sick, as recorded in the book of Acts. Now, it should be noted that what makes an icon holy is not a special type of wood or an angelic paint, but because it depicts Christ or one of the saints. Just as the fabric of a handkerchief is not innately holy, rather it becomes holy through contact with St. Paul. As a certain Athanasius, just as a minor aside, this is not Athanasius the Great, even though the quote is often attributed to him online. But as this Athanasius explains in his work Questions and Answers to Antiochus the Duke, quote, "We believers by no means worship images as gods, as the pagans, but rather we only express the affection and love of our soul towards the figure depicted in the icon. Wherefore, generally, once the image fades, that which was once the icon, we burn in fire, as useless wood." So, as to be expected in 16th century Russia, an Orthodox Christian empire, icons were abound. It is related that one such icon, of the Virgin Mary holding the infant Jesus, said to be miracle-working, hung from the Gate of Barbara, named after Saint Barbara, who had a church dedicated to her nearby. Pilgrims would gather around the icon to pray, pay their respects, or in hope of being healed. And at one such occasion, as the pilgrims gathered, Saint Basil approached as well. The holy fool then bent down and picked up a rock and hurled it at the icon of the Virgin Mary hanging on that wall. Let's talk about the hell icons. Chapter 1. What are hell icons? When we read the life of a saint, the purpose is firstly to recount the events of said saint's life, which, secondly, serves to edify and inspire the faithful. While there may be fantastical elements in a saint's hagiography, we should of course remember that these fantastical elements or stories are no different than the similarly fantastical events which took place in the Old and New Testaments. It is, however, the case that, whether from ignorance or misplaced zeal, at times apocryphal tales are added to the life of a saint, without actually being a factual event. Father Seraphim Rose, in one of his talks, laments some of the distorted hagiographies in the Middle Ages, turning them something more akin to a fairy tale than a historical account. And while a fable with an edifying lesson being added to the life of a saint is not necessarily the end of the world, when such a fable comes into contradiction with church doctrine, then we may have a problem. Returning to Saint Basil and his apparent act of blasphemy, there are a few variations of what happens next. In one recounting, Basil actually instructed one of his disciples to strike the icon with a stone, and when he refused, Basil took it upon himself to do so. Another telling has the crowd of pilgrims descend upon him, beating the holy fool until he cried out, "Scrape it off, scrape it off." A third version has the saint calmly explain to the stunned crowd, while a fourth has him give his explanation after he is beaten and brought to trial. Regardless, though, of the exact order of events, Basil reveals the reason why he had stricken the icon, for behind the image of the Virgin Mary and Christ child, revealed by the stone he threw breaking the icon apart, the image of Satan was hidden below the top layer of paint. It turns out, the icon painter was bribed by the devil with 50 pieces of gold to paint his image below that of the Virgin Mary's, in order to delude the people into venerating and praying to him. Once the deceit was discovered, the iconographer was promptly executed. This was the first recorded instance of a supposed hell icon, an icon written in hell in the underground torment. A hell icon was an icon in which, behind the image of a saint, was painted an image of Satan, hell, demons, or simply horns hidden beneath the halo of a saint. Or, perhaps even worse, the image of a smoking Turk. Hell icons were considered dangerous for the faithful, since it was thought that they were a sort of black magic. So if someone offered a prayer in front of the icon, it was believed that the prayer went not to God, but to Satan, and that the prayer would then have the opposite effect. A prayer for healing would result in sickness or even death. But if this was true, where did they come from? Was there a cadre of demons going around bribing iconographers with bags of gold? Chapter 2. Where in the hell did they come from? There are a few theories put forth for who would have been behind these hell icons. The first theory involves a group known as the Old Believers, or Old Ritualists. In the middle of the 1600s, Patriarch Nikon of Moscow instituted several reforms for the Russian Church. See, at this time, sentiment was rising that the Russian Church was the only remaining sect of true Christians since the fall of the Byzantine Empire and the failed union between Constantinople and the Pope of Rome. A sentiment even suggesting that all the Greeks had become apostate since that time. Patriarch Nikon brought several learned Greek scholars to Moscow to consult the liturgical books and bring them more in line with Greek customs, ranging from the divine services, iconographic styles, and even the proper way to make the sign of the cross. As with all reforms, there was always a degree of resistance, and those who refused the changes became known as the Old Believers or Old Ritualists, resulting in a schism in the Russian Orthodox Church. As a result of these reforms, several types of icons were declared to be non-canonical, and all icons were to conform to the new standard. In an Old Believer text titled The Epistle of the Sacred Sufferer Deacon Theodore on the Knowledge of the Antichrist's Deception, it stated the influence of Antichrist could manifest as, quote, abominable heresies and various apostate icons. Therefore, as the Old Believers resisted the new type of Greek icons, it was alleged that it was the Old Believers themselves who would paint and distribute these hell icons in an effort to disprove the faith of the Niconian reformers, since, after all, the devil appearing behind these new icons would suggest something is wrong, to say the least. Another proposed perpetrator were the Jews or Judaizers, who believed that veneration of icons were a form of idolatry. So in order to undermine faith in the holy icons, they would create these hell icons and spread them around. A more malicious, on a personal level, theory was that someone might commission a hell icon and gift it to an enemy to bring misfortune upon them. Finally, it seems like the most widespread belief of the origins of the hell icons were a type of confidence trick by swindler merchants who traveled about. The idea was that a merchant would arrive to poor villages and offer to sell them icons of the old type, which would be appealing to Old Believers in particular. After this merchant made his sale, he would leave and a second merchant would arrive soon after with icons of his own to sell. When the peasants would then decline, since they had already purchased new icons, The con man would ask to see one and scratch the paint, revealing the devil underneath. The second merchant would then sell his own icons and offer to take the hell icons away to be disposed of, and the two would perform the scam on another unsuspecting village. In fact, in Nikolai Leskov's 1872 short story, The Sealed Angel, this very scenario plays out. That evening, I had a long talk with two painters, and was much shocked by them. One of them sold me an icon for 40 rubles and went away. The other painter said, "You won't care to offer prayers before this icon." "Why not?" said I. "Because," said he, "it is hell painted." And then with his nail he scratched, and a layer of the paint flew off from one corner, and on the background below was painted a devil with a tail. He rubbed away another piece, and another devil appeared. "Good heavens," I cried, "what does this mean?" "It means that you must give your order to me, and not to him." Then I saw clearly that these men had plotted together to play me a nasty trick, and, leaving behind me the icon, I went out with my eyes full of tears. Chapter 3. Hysterics and Hell Hunts. Leskov wrote The Sealed Angel right when hysteria surrounding hell icons reached a fever pitch, and rumors and accusations abound concerning these hellish images. In the mid-1800s, a major Moscow newspaper reported a story about peasant unrest as a result of these icons, and the story quickly spread to smaller publications. Witnesses came from villages and cities reporting that they had seen hell icons with their very own eyes, claiming that they had been painted with soot from the very jaws of hell itself, or even with the blood of the devil. One such story reported that a peasant had brought an icon for consecration and dropped it, breaking the covering and revealing a devil's face underneath, with the terrifying inscription, "Bow to me for 7 years, and you will be mine forever." Peasants formed patrols in several provinces and broke into homes to examine icons for any defects or suspicious markings, and burned any suspect icons, without remorse for the owners. And if the owners protested, they would be accused of idolatry or devil worship themselves. The hysteria was provoked by both illiterate priests and sensationalist newspapers, eager to report on the supposed devil worship taking place, no doubt gaining readers in the process, who would then retell the stories to others, adding fuel to the fire. And the sensationalist stories and rumors spread like wildfire. These hell hunts unfortunately resulted in several deaths as well. Soldiers were quickly dispatched to put down the unrest. But was the hysteria justified at all? Were the hell icons ever real? Or were they just a superstition that went out of control? Chapter 4. Okay, but were they even real? While the eyewitnesses of the hell icons were plenty, along with the stories alleging so, there has been no direct evidence that the hell icons ever truly existed, and not a single example exists today. 20th and 21st century restorationists using X-ray on old and antique icons have never found any sort of a hidden devil behind the face of a saint. The horror stories that one might accidentally pray to or worship the devil played right into the fears and superstitions of the peasants. So where did the idea of these hell icons come from? Returning to the Niconian reforms, it's likely that the idea of iconographic standards could have morphed into the fear that a certain icon might be cursed or satanic. While I don't find it likely that old believers themselves made hell icons, the idea of this new standard being thrust upon them, and their old icons being classed as not acceptable to the church anymore, it's very easy to see how the ideas of apostate icons could morph into hell icons, especially with fear of Antichrist delusion seducing the masses. The reasoning, of course, exists on the side of the reformers as well, since new icons had to follow certain guidelines. A famous example of a non-canonical icon from the 1800s was an icon of the Holy Trinity, though instead of 3 distinct persons, as in Rublev's famous rendition, The icon depicted a single man who is an amalgamation of three people, with 3 noses, 3 mouths, and 4 eyes, which would be more at home depicting a Hindu god than anything Christian-related. In fact, in the Russian Penal Code of 1832, manufacture and sale of seductive-looking icons was declared to be deliberate blasphemy. As a result, these strange non-canonical images were a perfect breeding ground for rumors and accusation of something more diabolical taking place beneath the surface. Returning to the beloved Saint Basil for a moment, the story of him pelting an icon of the Virgin Mary, revealing a devil underneath, was most likely an apocryphal tale added to a life of his during this time of hysteria. But what about the icons that were being claimed to be hell-painted? What were they? There is the possibility that there were perfectly legitimate icons that illiterate peasants mistook as evil, such as an icon of the Last Judgment, or a saint being tempted by a demon, or even seeing an icon of St. Christopher with a dog's head and thinking it's a devil. The other possibility is that they were just poorly painted icons. While monasteries and theological academies produced icons in line with proper canonical guidelines, in order to paint an icon, all one really needs is the material to do so, not even necessarily the requisite skill. So a poorly painted icon with flaws and disfigurements, or peeling and cracked paint, could be mistaken for something demonic, like how one might see a face in the clouds or in a popcorn ceiling. And just because something's ugly doesn't make it evil. Hot take, I don't think we should kill ugly people. Controversial opinion, I know. But even if we admit that hell icons most likely did not exist, could they? And could you accidentally pray to the devil, if so? Chapter 5. The Theology of Hell Icons. Returning to the theology of the icon, as I said before, the reason why an icon is holy is because the person being depicted is holy. So, if, for example, a Satanist built an idol of Baphomet, yeah, that's not a good thing and it should be destroyed. But if we look to an icon, we're not praying to the icon. We're not worshipping the icon. We're praying to the person depicted. So even if a devil was hiding underneath a layer of paint, unless one is specifically invoking the devil in prayer, you're not going to pray to it accidentally. You know, God is not looking for gotchas and excuses to damn us, but rather the opposite. If we're praying to him, the intent is what matters. But even then, say, hypothetically, one of these icons existed, and after praying I drop it and I see the devil underneath, what do? Well, it's probably best to dispose of it. My intentions were pure in prayer. I did no wrong. However, the person who made the icon obviously had ill intent in doing so. So it would be proper to dispose of it and to get a different icon, one which was produced prayerfully. When asked about hell icons, Archpriest Leonid Kolinin, former head of the Russian Orthodox Church's expert council on church art, architecture, and restoration, explained the theology of demons in iconography. Quote, "The devil cannot be present by himself on an icon ever. After all, this dark force is by definition ugly, that is, it has no image. The personality of the unclean, because of their service to evil, is as if erased. Therefore, evil is portrayed in a certain context. For example, on the icon Last Judgment, the devil appears as a creature located in the depths of hell and devouring the souls of sinners, in an unsightly image, small in size. Artists, in this case, always used black paint. However, hell icons, some mentally or spiritually ill people, of course, could draw. It could not be regulated, but it was not widespread. So again, returning to a hypothetical hell icon, even if there was a devil painted with ill intent, as soon as the image of a saint is painted over it, the devil's power is rendered null and void simply due to the holiness of the figure. It's like shining a flashlight into the darkness of the night. The dark scatters. To quote the beginning of John, "In him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not." The dark can't comprehend the light. It has no power over it. And that should be the ultimate takeaway, and what we should always remember. The demons only really have as much power as we give them, and nothing more than that. Chapter 6. The Soviet Addendum. Earlier I mentioned how the hysteria leading to the hunt for these icons was the result of illiterate and uneducated peasants falling into superstition. However, while it may seem easy to think ourselves better than these peasants, that we are more educated, refined, and we wouldn't allow ourselves to fall into such hysterics, the truth of the matter is that it is just a part of the human condition to fall into suspicions and these types of hell hunts. Something I wanted to mention was how the same sentiment re-emerged during the Soviet era, with the party attempting to root out any anti-Soviet sentiment in imagery, even if it meant punching the shadows. The year is 1937, the centennial celebration of Alexander Pushkin, a famous Russian poet, and often called the father of modern Russian literature. In celebration of Pushkin, notebooks were produced to the tune of 200 million, with portraits of the poet and illustrations of his works on the covers. So these notebooks were produced and distributed to schoolchildren. However, December 19th, an urgent announcement was put out by the party. All schools were instructed to collect the notebooks, which featured certain illustrations on the cover, and for the covers to be removed and destroyed. This naturally led to a panic, and even more notebooks were caught up in the fervor, extending beyond the Pushkin notebooks. This occurred again with the notebooks commemorating the non-stop flight of Moscow to Vancouver, which also led to a mass arrest of employees at the Odessa factory which had produced them. The reason for the hysteria was alleged anti-Soviet messaging hidden in the illustrations. Notebooks for school children were now without covers, and possession of one of these forbidden Pushkin notebooks was very dangerous. And if one of these were found in one's belongings when they were arrested, very severe consequences were imposed. So while it might be easy to scoff at the religious or superstitious and uneducated masses, it's important to realize that these sorts of hunts for unseen demons is a part of what it means to be human. The suspicion, the anxiety. Even the most allegedly educated of us can fall into hysterics and be left punching at ghosts. And with that, I'd like to give a special shout out to my brother in Christ Marco, who gifted me the custom painted icon of Father Seraphim Rose I featured earlier in the video. It is a gift I cherish very much, so please say a small prayer for him and his family if you would. And if you'd like to support my endeavors in continuing making these videos, there are links in the description to Patreon, Subscribestar, and Ko-fi. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe if you have not already. And if you didn't like this video, well, maybe send it to an enemy of yours instead. And with that, thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time.